Today I want to talk about drugs, not alcohol or weed, but needles. Here's an Uber story which is 100% true. The following experience taught me to stop judging people on drugs. Although I was never a judgmental person to begin with, every now and then I made inconsiderate comments disguised as jokes. But from this point forward, no more jokes. I'm no longer judging people on drugs. Why? Because I do not know the circumstances that led them to start in the first place. One day I made a hospital pickup. The passenger was a 72-year-old man with white hair named Philip. After starting the ride, I noticed his destination was my old apartment complex. We both laughed about it. Then he told me about his arthritis. He was taking a bunch of medicine to keep the pain away. He also mentioned his daughter, who was born in 1980. From the moment she was born, she always cried. During her childhood, she woke up every night screaming at the top of her lungs because her hands felt like they were on fire. Not a single doctor could figure out why. As she got older, the pain got worse. Philip and his wife were devastated. They felt like God was punishing them for some unknown reason. Why would his daughter be born with pain? He tried religion, he tried traditional treatments, holistic treatments, he tried everything. He and his wife even denounced God because, as he said, why would God put a child through all this pain? But when his daughter was 13, they finally got some good news. They finally found a name for her disease. It was an extremely rare case of arthritis that less than 1% of the population had. There was no medicine nor treatments known to man. They were stuck, but at least they had a name for it. Then something interesting happened. She noticed that every time she played an instrument, used a screwdriver, hammered a nail, or did anything with her hands, the pain subsided. About a year later, they got even better news. They met a doctor who had a controversial past. This specific doctor found medicine that would help. Unfortunately, there were no previous cases that they could use as a reference as to whether it would be a success. It was experimental. The daughter was going to be the first person who used this drug, like a guinea pig. Here's what happened. After the first week, her pain went away. Every now and then it returned, but she managed it by staying active. Philip told me she loved drawing, playing sports, and cutting hair. With her newfound hobbies combined with the medicine, his daughter's future looked promising. I was happy to hear this, so I asked how she's doing these days. His exact words were, "She's not doing so well." Then he changed the subject, and I dropped him off at his apartment. I wished him well, he closed the door, and I drove away. This is why Uber is such an interesting job. You have no idea what's going to happen from one day to the next. The random life. Shameless plug, but my audiobook is somewhere on this channel. Enjoy. Anyway, back to the story. Over a year later, I was driving through Claymont. All of a sudden, I got a ride request from my old apartment complex. I was picking up someone named Philip. And just for the record, I had no memory of Philip at this particular moment. As I said, this was over a year later. So I drove to the front entrance, and the only person I saw was a lady standing in the grass. She looked rough. She was doing the fentanyl lean, as they call it, meaning she was leaning over without falling down. She was wide awake and half asleep at the same time. I thought to myself, when did this neighborhood become like this? I never saw this when I lived here. Down the street in Riverside? Sure, but not in this complex. Anyway, I waited a few minutes and no one walked out the front door. I was just about to cancel the ride when the lady stopped leaning, woke up from her high, stared at me, then aggressively walked to my car. She approached and asked, "Are you an Uber driver for Philip?" I thought to myself, holy crap. It was at this exact moment that I remembered her father. All it took was a split second, and I vividly recalled the entire conversation I had with him. I immediately knew this was his daughter. She got in my car and passed out. She leaned out the same way all of my methadone passengers do on the way to the clinic. She looked rough, not judging, just making an observation. I started the ride and noticed we were going to the rehab center. She was definitely getting her shots. Although it sounds weird, I actually like these passengers. They make my job exciting. They're either passed out and extremely quiet, or they tell me their entire life story. She was both. For the first half of the ride, she was slumped over with her head almost touching the floor. No exaggeration. Then she abruptly woke up and started talking. She sounded punch drunk, she was slurring her speech and her eyes looked crazy. I knew for a fact this was Philip's daughter, the same daughter who was born with a terrible disease. How coincidental, how sad. I'm convinced that I would make a great therapist. Well, let me rephrase. I'm a good listener is what I mean. I have no idea if my advice is any good, but I know for a fact that passengers are comfortable telling me everything. As she spoke about her life, I nodded my head in agreement with everything she said as we flew down the highway. She pretty much confirmed everything her father told me over a year ago. She mentioned the rare case of arthritis, she mentioned the experimental medicine. She also told me she loved fixing cars and playing sports, mainly because it relieved her pain. In fact, she wanted to join the army to fix tanks. I told her that was amazing. The point is, without me asking a single question, she voluntarily confirmed everything her father told me. When I asked if she was still in the military, she got quiet for a moment, stared out the window for a few seconds, then said, "I never joined the military. I messed up my life before I could join." According to her, her prescription medication became too expensive sometime during the mid-90s, so she turned to the street. She started using small doses of heroin, but only when the arthritis flared up. Then one day she met a drug dealer who she found attractive. He didn't do any drugs at first, but as time passed, they started getting high together. Shortly after, they began dating, and their lives went downhill from there. Recreational drug use quickly transformed into full-blown addiction. They both got fired from their respective jobs, they were evicted from their apartment, and they eventually broke up. Years went by, and sometime in her mid-30s, she discovered the worst drug of all, fentanyl. That's when she moved to Kensington and turned into a zombie. Sharing needles and sleeping outdoors were two things she never thought she would ever do. Then one day, she realized, oh my God, I'm sharing needles with strangers and sleeping in parks. She was very honest about everything. She never wanted to be a drug user. She only wanted the pain to go away. I could tell she wasn't lying. I kept hearing her dad's words saying, "She's not doing so well." The drugs destroyed this poor girl. Her face was slightly deformed, her body was unnaturally skinny, and her eyes. Yes, the eyes. I've driven hundreds of addicts in Kensington. All of their eyes are the same. Fear and imprisonment is what I see. They look like prisoners against their will. Very sad. I often ask myself, just how strong is fentanyl? I wish I could snap my fingers and break their addiction, but unfortunately it doesn't work like that. Interacting with these passengers makes you more compassionate. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being attractive, she was a 1. She did not look good at all. At one point, she randomly said, "I have a fat ass for a white girl. All the black dudes love me." I had no idea why she randomly said that. There was no way she was hitting on me. Then again, if she was high, maybe she was. But in all fairness, she was switching subjects the entire ride. I felt bad for her, especially since I knew what she was born with. She deserves respect, especially since she was in the process of quitting drugs. In the past, whenever I drove through drug blocks, I judged everyone who looked like a zombie. I would ask myself, why are they messing with this stuff? Don't they have anything better to do? Don't they have jobs? Don't they have family? But now, I know better. They're not doing the drugs are doing them. And once you become a broke junkie, nobody wants to fool with you anymore. You probably owe everyone money, and your credibility is shot. So, in order to cope, what do? Easy. More drugs. Kensington will always welcome you. As a passenger once told me, you don't start in Kensington, you end there. Here's the punchline to the story. Here is the life lesson I received straight from God himself. This poor girl was born to be an addict, period. It sounds crazy, but think about it. She was born with an extremely rare disease which required her to constantly take drugs. Otherwise, as she said, her entire body was on fire. That's terrible. So from that day forward, I no longer ask myself why people inject themselves with drugs. You never know what led them to the needle. Some do it recreationally, and others do it because their body is on fire. Now, that's scary. It's interesting. Some might say she brought this on herself. Sometimes when I get home from the bar at 2 a.m., I go online and find myself in the dark corners of YouTube chasing a rabbit through a tunnel for 5 hours straight. When I climb back to sea level, I peek through my window and stare at my mailbox, wondering if there's a grenade in it. But that's my problem, not yours. Anyway, as I finally go to sleep, I ponder all of the theories I just absorbed. Reincarnation, the theory of karma, theories of quantum jumping, and the soul cycle theory, just to name a few. Now I sound like a freaking Uber passenger. My point is, some people believe that this poor girl is being punished in this lifetime for mistakes that she made in another dimension. This is why some babies are born into wealthy families and others are born into poverty, according to some philosophers. Anyway, have a good night and God bless.